mental health, emotional health, physical health, deeper understanding, actionable takeaways to improve your quality of life. We're the Level Up guys.
Even guys can have emotionally literate conversations about these hard topics, and we're the guys that are going to prove it. Let's level up. It might be unsafe to show up with anger if the parent isn't able to regulate themselves in the face of a child's overwhelming anger. And so for the child, it can be unsafe. It can be literally unsafe to risk the disconnection that could happen. Or at least that's the message that our mammal bodies and brains get. Connection at all costs when you're a child, even if that means making yourself bad, or cutting off your own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we're really taught that. I was never taught that, like how to be angry and it's okay to be angry and upset at something. I just had to figure it out in the trenches along the way.
Yeah.
Looking at like most of us, probably all of us, there's no, there's no class on the schedule for emotions.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, well, we should be happy and be a good boy and don't cause trouble and do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's gotten me a little bit into trouble at times in my life because I like to speak my mind. And I think sometimes it's maybe in society we're more accustomed to just letting it sink in, and just there and it just percolates until, 6 months later.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it relates generally to how did our parents or caregivers or, the adults in our life when we were very young, yes, there wasn't a class, but also our nervous system learned how to manage anger way before we were in school, based on what was my anger met with in others, right? Like if my anger was met with somebody else's anger when I'm a young child, then yeah, I'm not going to risk that disconnection. I'm going to cut off my anger from myself. And, what does it mean about me if somebody else can't handle my anger? The child's mind is well, it means that I'm too much, or, I'm not capable enough of managing this experience. So it's like that, too much and not enough flip side of the coin, the reciprocals that kind of play into each other. And, as a child, we're not built to self-regulate. And we need co-regulation from the people around us. So, can I regulate and manage somebody else's anger? Either being directed at me or just even in my environment. As a child, no. As an adult, yes, if I've done the work on my experience of anger. But that's not always the case. That's what I've had to do because I wanted a different relationship to my emotions and therefore a different relationship to my relationships, or I just wanted different relationships in my life, deeper relationships that could handle my emotional experiences. But yeah, so as an adult, yes, we're capable of self-regulating in a way that we weren't when we were younger. But in some ways, unfortunately, the wiring gets made much earlier on when we're not capable of that self-regulation.
Yeah. I mean, that's why there's a wait list down the street to see you, as a therapist, because since we don't learn these things, we had to figure it out later on at an older age and go through it.
Yeah. My favorite work is with the parents of young kids, right? Because I can, in my office, I can manage their anger, but I'm with them for at most typically 45 minutes once a week, right? Whereas the parents or teachers I also really like working with are with them for far more time. And if they can regulate their own experience and help their children co-regulate, then it actually sets them up for much more self-acceptance. I think that before you were touching upon if I don't deal with it, what happens? And yeah, there's that buildup. It can turn into rage. It can turn into kind of self-hate, right? There can be impacts to self-worth as well as behavior on the outside, and how and I mean, how we see ourselves and treat ourselves generally is a mirror to how we engage with others in the world, because it's our best guess about who they are as well. But yeah,
There's a lot of wisdom in that, and it's perhaps because of the work of service that you and I do, we have a little bit of an advantage. Like I see in yoga class and Pilates class, I developed tremendous compassion for people. And I know for myself, back in the day, I had back surgery before. That's how we discovered yoga in the first place. And it was a failed back surgery. Like I was in miserable pain. I was like a cripple. It was, and was angry. And all of the energy coming out of me and or everything was this like anger. And it was born from like this physical pain,
mm,
you know, and somehow I was able to translate that into now being able to look at people if they're like being angry towards me and being like, they might have a broken heart or a bad knee or, their dog just died or something. Same
yeah,
with somebody cutting me off in traffic. I try really hard to think that, oh, they're rushing to the hospital because their wife is about to give birth. Or if somebody's driving really slowly, I'm imagining that maybe they have their dog in the back seat with a broken leg and they're going to the vet,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
like, how could you? And it makes it so much easier because I can only control me and how I interpret things like that.
yeah,
But these little stories go through my mind because I get
yeah.
very easy to be like, what the fuck? Let's go. Why are we
Well,
driving so slow? And then but then you can develop compassion and gratitude for, this little story in your mind you might tell. It's
yeah,
easier.
yeah. There's a quote that I love, that I think I don't know if it was his originally, but I heard from Mark Groves, who has a great podcast, just shouting it out,
Oh yeah.
that I have done so much of my own work with. Um, but there's a quote that I heard him say one time, which is hurt people,
Yep. I've
right?
heard
So
that.
like people who are hurt people, right?
Yep.
And anger comes from hurt, as we said,
Hmm.
right? And so, yeah, like that's if, and it's okay to have been hurt. It's a natural part of living, right? But um, if when we were younger, we didn't have somebody supporting our healing and supporting our meaning making narrative of what that hurt means about us and about the world, then people will really struggle to do that for themselves as adults unless you start to reprogram some of, what your childhood meaning making was.
I feel like every podcast we have, every talk we have, always comes back to the totally overused word of gratitude.
Mm,
It's totally overused in all circles, and it's like the word, it's massively important. Because, for example, if I get pulled over and I get a $500 speeding ticket, I could be angry, or I could think to myself, well, it's the middle of the day on a Thursday, and obviously I have some time off to be able to do this. It's a beautiful day. Like I'm able to I'm fit enough to motorcycle. I have enough money to be able to buy one. I have my driver's license. I live on the East Coast of the United States. Like there's all of these great things, if you keep coming back to some of the basic things. I have breath in my lungs and, you have ears that you can put headphones on and hear my words and I have
yeah.
eyes and I can see you and all of those all comes back to gratitude all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you're kind of hinting at something that feels relevant here too, which is like, um, you actually get to choose the meaning making, right? Like it may not be the first thing that shows up, so your attention might go to something, right? Um, and then oftentimes the meaning making that shows up informs what the emotion is that we'll experience, which then informs what action we'll take. Okay. And
Mm.
so, um, and as we said before, emotion does give a cue for a type of action required. Um, and one thing that we can do is if our attention is brought to something, whether, that might be a feeling or, something in our body or like a memory or even just, yeah, even just like an emotional experience, um, we get to choose the meaning, right? You could choose to bring your attention in that moment of getting the $500 speeding ticket or whatever of like, it's a beautiful day, I'm out on a bike. You could also, because you don't know what the future is, you could also say, that $500 speeding ticket saved my life because I could have gotten in a crash.
Exactly.
Like that can be your takeaway, right?
Beautiful.
You get to choose that. And that's going to create a very different emotion of like that cop just saved my life, you know, by forcing me to slow down, as opposed to that cop ruined my life because $500 isn't a small chunk of change, right? Like you're going to respond very differently in terms of what your next action is. You might be like, you know, like that guy sucks and speed away. And then, you know, maybe whether you get hurt or somebody else gets hurt as a result of like that impulsivity and that kind of reactivity versus like, oh yeah, right? Like there's a reason that I maybe shouldn't be going that fast today because maybe there's a reason that today I got pulled over, right? Or whatever it is. Like you get to choose that. And although it's not the first meaning making that often shows up, because as adults we rely a lot on our childhood meaning making, and we can talk a little bit about that in a second. But as adults, we also get to be purposeful about the meaning making in the way that we couldn't have before. And you get to choose an action, or you get to choose a meaning that will give you an emotion that will create an action that actually aligns with your value system, as opposed to a reaction impulsively that maybe doesn't align with who you want to think of yourself as, or know yourself to be, or how you want to behave, you know, in the world. But yeah, I mean, like in terms of being an adult, you know, when we are triggered by anger, and that's like when anger is like on a, you know, above 5 on the scale, like of the scale of 0 to 10. When it's, you know, 6 and above, generally that's an indication that we're reacting to old wounds and unmet childhood needs that that are not as much about the current person that we're interacting with or the current situation that we're engaged in. What that current person or situation did is they opened a channel to some pre-existing pain or, you know, painful belief about what our meaning making was about ourselves during this unmet childhood need. And then once that is triggered, the nervous system follows, right? Or actually, it's probably the nervous system first. And that activates that childhood meaning making. And now we're using the same protective mechanisms for that pain that we did when we were a child. And that might be fight, flight, freeze. Could be sometimes we appease people in those moments, or you know, offer them something. I've also heard of like fawning.
Yeah.
Sometimes can get you out of unsafe or situations that feel unsafe or anticipate that. But when we do that as adults, or, you know, when we do that as adults, now we're actually, you know, more held responsible for the how that's manifesting in our relationships. Like the people we're in relationships with are going to be like, nope. Or, you know, it depends on the relationship, but like at a job, like if you just, you know, meet that with like, all right, I'm just going to steal more shit, like you might get fired, right? There are different types of consequences, or even the flight, right? Like I'm leaving this job. Well, now you have somebody who can't keep a job, right? So it's really important as adults to manage it differently. And yeah, I mean, we had talked about like numbing anger as well. If you kind of numb it or cut off yourself to it, I mean, anger is meant to create action in the body, right? And so if that is what our body is telling us and we're not doing it, we're now countering our body's intuition, which ultimately can lead to an internal conflict of like, I can't trust my internal experience, right? When we deny our anger, we invalidate our pain and our hurt. And also make it so that our self-worth is impacted. If I can't trust myself, right, then I probably can't go out in the world and do something that might require some healthy aggression or assertion. Like, you know, for some people, it could be write a book. For other people, it could be make a podcast or things like that, right? Like if I can't trust myself, that's not a risk I'm taking. And so if we're not achieving these things that are within us to achieve, then our self-worth will suffer.
Nice. That's a level up moment right there. All right. Any last little tidbits for us to all level up our game and get smarter, and be able to deal with it? I mean, one of my big takeaways is, or my thoughts is, you can be proactive with it and practice good tools and good lifestyle techniques. So when the anger does come, it's more manageable. Like for me, fitness and getting good sleep, and nutrition, meditation, love listening to music deeply on headphones, things like that. So I know what my calm baseline is, so I can try to get back to that and really have that as a wiring in my brain.
Yeah,
Nice calm place.
having a toolkit can be really important because, like I
Mhm.
said, we actually want to welcome anger to show up whenever it does. The fact that anger shows up doesn't mean that we're a bad person, doesn't mean that we are having bad thoughts or bad feelings or anything like that. I think you started out by saying it's neither good or bad. It's essentially just whatever we tell ourselves it is, that's what we'll think it is, right?
Yep.
And so allowing that anger to show up like authentically and in our body, like really embodying it for 90 seconds in a way that doesn't harm somebody or doesn't harm ourselves or impact a job that we want to keep or things like that. um, and then releasing it through the body, right? Releasing that energy. It can be punching a punching bag. It can be for a run. It can be doing a yoga class. It can be taking some deep breaths. Temperature change is really effective for anger. So splashing cold water on your face and over your eyes, particularly if you kind of lean down when you do it, it activates the diver's reflex, which sends messages through our vagus nerve to our organs and like slows the heartbeat
Mhm.
and all kinds of things like that. And
Speaking
then,
of the vagus nerve, I mean,
oh yeah,
simply singing and even humming,
yeah,
like humming can actually, like I'm
music,
humming all the
yeah,
time, singing all the time because I know like this major nerve, your vagus nerve, you can affect your emotions.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, my dad
absolutely.
used to say, and I never understood it as a kid, like some people smile when they're happy. No, some people sing songs when they're happy, and some people are happy when they sing songs.
Mm,
And that's kind of thing, like the curation of happiness.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, and so I mean, having a toolkit, but really doing the work to figure out what is my relationship with anger and where did that come from? You
Mhm.
know, am I making meaning of my own anger based on, a young childhood experience? How do I feel about when others are angry with me? And again, it's okay to not feel good about that, right? It doesn't feel good when somebody's angry at you, but am I able to tolerate that? And one, recognize maybe there's some childhood experience that we open to channel for that like we can have our own boundaries for because
Mhm.
that's the other thing. Anger is a cue for sturdier boundaries.
Yep.
It's I mean, interpersonal experiences can be messy, right? Especially when there's a level of authentic emotional expression in them.
Mhm.
And uh, what it really comes down to is like, are people going to be more avoidant of conflict? Are they going to be more seeking of conflict as a result of anger? So there's the flight, the fight, and also you can be conflict comfortable, right? Like not seeking it, but if it shows up, being feeling like you have boundaries and like I will be okay. Like this felt maybe unsafe as a child, and it maybe was dangerous as a child in some cases. But it feels that way right now, but I know that like I will survive this, and so I can tolerate it. And for really good relationships, boundaries not only honor yourself, like with self-care and kind of proactively protecting, it actually honors other people, the other people that we are stating our boundaries to and stating our needs to. Um, because it's like, I want for you to be somebody in my life. And in order for me to feel good about you being that person in my life, here's something that's really important for you to know about me, right? This is how people access me or access the parts of me that I want to give. Like that's the key to a door that might have a huge wall otherwise.
Thanks
Yeah.
everybody out there for listening and tuning in. Catch us on YouTube, wherever we are in the world. Thanks for being here and in our conversation.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here as we try to level ourselves up and share about that introspection that we've been doing, and also some of the resources that we've absorbed along the way. Thanks for
Nice.
leveling up with us.
All right, later.
That's it for today, you guys. Make sure to follow us. You can find us on all the major platforms. If you really like what you heard, maybe share it with a friend, share it with a buddy, maybe share it with an enemy, because we all need a little bit of love. We're going to level up together. See you next time.